discussed. First, something outside the box. Ever hear the phrase in loco parentis? Yes, from the Hamilton song, My Shot, I'm a tailor's apprentice, and I got you all knuckleheads in loco parentis. But also from the law and government. In loco parentis means in place of the parent. And we use it when there's a duty to act in the best interests of the child. But it also applies to how government acts in care of the citizenry. Okay? Now, this is tricky. And right now we're living a moment when in loco parentis is more loco, as in crazy, than parentis, meaning in terms of doing what you should do. Why? We have a member of Congress tonight who's trying to get us the truth about the Kennedy assassinations and the Epstein case. But the government is treating her and you like dumb kids who can't handle the truth. As of now, even in the Trump administration, his DOJ won't even answer when this representative gets the files to show the rest of us. We need transparency to restore trust. I ask tonight, where is it? And we'll have the member of Congress to give us an answer. Then, there are major moves on immigration. One sounds pretty good. A couple sound kind of bad. First, Trump is offering citizenship and special status to foreigners who pay $5 million for it. The gold card, he says, not just a green card, the gold card. Some are offended. Kind of smacks of selling what should be free. Since when is it free? It's never been free. The existing EB-5 visa is there already for investors. It demands a $1 million investment that creates 10 jobs. It's already in the law. Democrats never had a problem. Now they do. And ask anyone who's gone through the green card process if it's free. Lawyers bilk many thousands of dollars from people who can't afford to pay it and sometimes can't afford to fight back because they're not here illegally or they're in the process and they're afraid and people know it and they take advantage of it all the time. So what Trump is doing now is upping the ante. Here's the president explaining it.
We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people.
Listen, I was raised on the New Colossus and the Emma Lazarus poem and the idea of huddled masses and America being for those who couldn't be accepted other places. But the idea that this is a bad idea of Trump because what about all those who can't pay? That is a misplaced sense of defense of a minority that doesn't exist. We have an entire system for people who can't pay for entrance. Just because President Trump says it doesn't mean you have to spit on it. Judge the ideas and the actions, not just the man. You'll still have plenty to work with. Now, can the president do this? That I don't know. Congress reauthorized the EB-5 program in 2022. The power of the purse often extends a responsibility to go back to that which has the power of the purse, which would be Congress. So he would likely need Congress's blessing to add to or alter the program. But why would they fight this? It seems like a pretty good idea. Legal immigration, which is what this is about, is very necessary, and it gets neglected in lieu of this hyper-focus on illegal entrance. And slowing legal immigration is a problem for our economy and our communities. Now, there is an equal idea today, but it is troubling, okay? A registry for illegal immigrants. This is why President Trump has people thinking he has some dark tendencies. Why? A registry smacks of dark periods of our history. The idea that you want people 14 or older to be required to submit fingerprints and home addresses to the government, and if they fail to register, they could be fined $5,000, sentenced to 6 months in prison. Now, here's what doesn't work for me. We'll get to the darkness, but just the practicality, all right? If you are here illegally, isn't the president's plan to deport you? Why not identify these people and remove them? Why have them sign a registry? Right? But for me, as someone who questions the logistical, financial, and moral propositions involved in deporting 10 million plus folks, maybe this is a nod to the reality that Trump can't or shouldn't deport all illegal entrants because they are not all the same. But even then, this registry is still a bad look. Smacks of the jingoism that led to the Muslim men being registered under President Bush and what Trump tried also in the travel ban. And also then before that, the alleged communists that they were trying to round up and register in the 40s and 50s, or the internment camps for the Japanese. That's what a registry smacks of, okay? The ugliness of America's experience. Besides the bias, ask yourself a practical question. What illegal migrant is going to volunteer to register for something if it leads to their deportation, right? If they're hiding, they're going to hide. And if, again, this is a nod to the reality that you can't or won't deport them all, then you don't need a new registry. You already have one. The tax rolls. And right now, it's estimated that only at most half of illegal workers pay fully into the system. So get them paying into the system. You got the registration. Okay? Last point. Gitmo. Gitmo is becoming proof that we are not just deporting the worst. And that was the promise. And again, I understand that if you enter illegally, you are at risk of deportation. But I'm telling you, it doesn't make sense to treat all people who enter illegally the same way. It does not reflect the reality of the value or the experience in this country. And we are at risk of once again looking like we are among the worst in terms of how we treat people. The Washington Post spoke to 3 migrants who went to Gitmo. Post says they had no previous criminal record besides being in the country illegally. That is not rounding up the worst of the worst, but it is treating these people like they were the worst. They were only allowed to go outside twice for 1 hour a time over the course of 2 weeks. That could violate the 8th Amendment. Cruel and unusual punishment. They were denied calls to lawyers, loved ones. That could violate the 5th Amendment. Due process. Arguably the 14th Amendment. Now, Secretary Hegseth toured the migrant facility at Gitmo today with Fox host Laura Ingraham. Let's be honest. Okay? Fox is more fan than fair broker. So these issues I'm presenting you with right now didn't come up, and that's not the job. It has to, because America must remain a beacon of humanity. We can enforce the law and be better than the places that are sending people running for their lives to our border. Let's discuss immigration, what's working, what isn't, and why. Former Deputy Secretary at Homeland Security under President Trump, Ken Cuccinelli, and former Director of ICE under Obama, John Sandwich. John, Cooch, it's good to have you both. Cooch, what do you make of what I said?
Which part? I do think I agree with you on the, some people have the orange man bad syndrome. And the $5 million price tag on the EB-5 is a good example. I'm not a big fan of the EB-5 concept. One, the money that supposedly they invest always just gets bilked, frankly, by Americans who get pools of these investors who want to buy their way to U.S. citizenship. I also think it degrades U.S. citizenship. But you are right. It has been on the books for 35 years. And if it's going to be on the books, it ought to cost a lot. So I like $5 million more than $1 million, and I can tell you when I was the regulatory leader in DHS, we raised the price, so I know you can change it. I'd have to go back and look at the statutes, but we changed it in the first Trump administration, and so I know that he has some authority to do that. So I don't know that you would need to go back to Congress. Also, with respect to Gitmo, look, it's designed in part to be used and has many times been used as a migrant facility. These are human beings. I don't care whether they came here illegally or not. We expect people to be treated with dignity. But they're also prisons. And people are being held. They're being detained. And immigration law says you'll be detained. We haven't always had the facilities to do that for everybody that we apprehend. And Gitmo is expanding that capacity. And there are going to be some kinks in working through that. It's okay to, perfectly normal to feel compassion for folks, but they are on the wrong side of the law and they should be deported. And we have to balance those two things out. I think you'll see this progress and work itself out over time.
Yeah, but how you hold them matters. My producer is getting in my ear and he's saying, you have 400,000 people sign up for the gold card and that would reduce your deficit to almost zero. Yeah, but if cherries and nuts were ifs and buts, we'd all have a great Christmas. I don't know that you're going to get 400,000. I don't know there are that many. I don't know why you do the math, but you don't know if it's practical. John Sandwich, what is about practicality is which people you're rounding up and why. We were told this is about the bad hombres, okay? More and more. Now, to be fair to Mr. Holman, he said, when we round them up or fine them, if they are in the company of other people who are here illegally, they're going to get taken too. Right. But sending them to Gitmo, how you hold these people matters also legally, but also ethically, doesn't it?
Yeah, Chris, look, I think this one, too, from an operational perspective, really makes no sense to me. You're taking these people, you're ripping them out of maximum security, secure facilities that are in the United States. You got to transport them all the way to Miami, stage them there, fly them 500 miles down to Gitmo, and just walk right into the middle of a legal morass, raising all of those issues you discussed about due process, constitutional rights. And what do you get out of it? I mean, ICE has 40,000 beds. They're arguably at capacity now. But during the first Trump administration, as the deputy secretary knows, they can beef that up to 50,000 at ICE. They're about to get an influx of money. They can expand that even further. But they're building 10,000 beds in DOD facilities inside the United States right now, which brings your capacity up to 60,000. That's before you get to the Bureau of Prisons and other available detention space. So what I don't understand about this one is from an operational perspective, you take a ton of money in, and you don't really get anything out of this. From a security perspective, remember, ICE has detained the worst of the worst since they were created 20 years ago. We have maximum security facilities where we put al-Qaeda terrorists in there, convicted murderers, and safely, securely detain them before we deported them. On this one, it just doesn't make any sense from an operational perspective, and it's a really expensive way to get some good optics or send some political messages.
Ken, on the point of optics, the registry, you heard my argument. It's that one, no one's going to volunteer for this if they're here illegally and looking to evade the system. But if you want to sign them up because you're not going to be able to deport them all, which could be a logistical, if not an ethical practicality, why not just put them on the tax rolls?
Well, on John's last optics point with respect to Gitmo, I would say that optics can also play into deterrence. So there is that feature. With respect to the list, I heard your comments before John and I came on. I don't agree with you, Chris. I do think that as a practical matter, your points that you just made are going to play out. Some people are just going to say, look, I know I'm here illegally. Why would I make it easier for you to find me? But others are going to cooperate. And if, like Secretary Noem has said, if you go home, you're in this category. If we have to pick you up, you're in this category. If they can create distinctions that motivate people to make this process more efficient and they get accommodations because of that, that's a trade-off that can take place. It can save the taxpayers money. It can make this whole process smoother, and it can achieve the president's goals faster in a way that is, frankly, easier on the people who are here illegally if they want to cooperate. So,
I get it. And
there are potential for trade-offs here.
I respect your disagreement. That's why I want you on the show, right? I mean, you're going to come here. We disagree. But
I appreciate that.
But it's on an ideas level, not a personal level. I couldn't do that to a fellow Italian anyway. John, here's my question for you. So, all right, it's about, if you sign up, it's not going to be as rough as if we have to come and get you, but you're still going to be deported. So where is the carrot in that for people?
I don't see, Chris, where you're going to get any significant numbers of people walking in and registering. If you're in this country unlawfully, you want to stay in this country, you'd be stupid, right, to go in and register. There's a good chance you get arrested when you go into the registration center. There's a good chance you get arrested shortly thereafter. This is about, this goes back to, again, it's tough to go out there and get individuals. When you're doing this targeted approach that ICE is doing, you've heard all these stories, the numbers are lower. This is a way to kind of put pressure on people to encourage self-deportation, but at the same time make the arrest function a little bit easier for ICE.
Right.
But every legalization program that, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, including the one, that was passed by the Senate in 2013, includes a registration provision, of course. Come in, pay a fine, get a background check, you pass the background check, you get to stay here. But without that carrot, I'm with you. I just don't see how this will.
I'll tell you one thing that we should all agree on, and this is a message to the Democrats out there. Stop encouraging your cities not to cooperate with federal law. Not only are you going to lose in court, but it just shows that you are not in touch with the majority of this country. That doesn't mean we have to treat people like animals. But sanctuary cities aren't legal, they aren't ethical, and they are flying against the majority, and I don't know why Democrats keep up that fight. Ken Cuccinelli, appreciate you. It's great to see you again. John Sandwig, thank you for coming in as always.
Good to be with you, Chris.
Good to see you both again. Cooch, thanks. Talk to you. 4 minutes and 35 seconds coming up. Again, this is NewsNation, okay? We're not going to agree, but how we disagree matters, because I want you to process it and come up with your own conclusions. And you can't do that if, Cooch and I are saying who's uglier. Florida member of Congress, Anna Paulina Luna, says transparency is the key to good government, and she took on a task that I got to tell you, as someone who likes having her on the show and watching her career, I was worried. I was worried for her on this. Why? I don't believe they're going to give her this stuff, and she's going to have to explain it. So the JFK assassination, the Bobby Kennedy assassination, the King assassination, the Epstein client list. We were told during the campaign we'd get all of them. Why isn't the DOJ getting back to Anna Paulina Luna? She explains next.
All America. What does that mean? Are they really across all America? NewsNation, with over 6,000 journalists in 200 stations covering the nation. That's news for all Americans, from journalists that respect all Americans.
You are who NewsNation is built to support.
From sea to shining sea, trust the only network who actually is what we say we are. NewsNation, news for all Americans.
All righty, Trump's budget bill just passed. Will it survive the legislative process? The question there is, what happens if Trump doesn't agree to pay for extending his tax cuts? Will conservatives cave as they did in 2016? And Trump told us during the election, transparency. That's how we get trust back. Transparency, right? On the big things that Americans want to know, right? The JFK and RFK assassinations, the Dr. King assassination, Jeffrey Epstein's client list, okay? Member of Congress Anna Paulina Luna had to vote on the bill tonight, but also took this job of channeling the transparency to get this information out to the American people. Now she can't get an answer from her own administration. Why? I also have a Doge question for her. Did you hear today that the person running it, maybe they weren't lying in open court about Musk not running Doge and not working for Doge? Who's Amy Gleason? And why did their 5 biggest spending cuts just all of a sudden get deleted? They were just celebrating them. Let's bring in Member of Congress from Florida, Anna Paulina Luna. Just finished voting on the House floor, of course, and part of passing that resolution. It's good to see you, my friend.
Very happy to be here, and sorry we're a little bit late, but I literally just came from the floor.
Luna, the job always comes first. Let me ask you, let's see if you can answer all my questions tonight. First, do you believe you get the tax cuts extended because they are paid for? Will conservatives make the case?
I actually just talked to Jason Smith about this, and I do believe that that's something that they're currently talking about right now, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Look, we have a very slim majority. As you saw, this reconciliation bill just passed by 1 vote. But again, you know, until things are finalized and hammered out, and remember, we have to get this through the Senate, I think I'll be able to answer that at a better time later on.
But what's the mood of what happened in 2016 versus now in terms of paying for them? That was a hard one for conservatives to swallow. I was obviously covering it back then at CNN, and they didn't like that deal. It led to Paul Ryan getting out of Congress. What's the recollection of that event and the feeling about what to do now?
Well, look, I wasn't here in 2016, but what I can tell you is from my very brief time here on the Hill, there has been a shift and change specifically with the open dialogue, not just with conservatives in the governing body, but also too, President Trump has been pretty instrumental in some of those negotiations, and his liaison team for Congress is actually pretty active. And so I know that including these members and making sure that they have a seat at the table prior to this legislation coming to the floor has been pretty key in passing legislation with such a tight majority. That is, again, something that I'm still hearing conversations about. Some of the more fiscal conservatives are obviously wanting to come to the table and negotiate. So I don't think that you'll see the same thing happen that happened in 2016.
All right. Now, Luna, you're pretty tough, right? You just forced me to apologize to you in a text we were going back because you didn't like how I was talking. So you're tough. So I want to know, what did you say to the DOJ about not giving you the transparency that everybody was promised? You know they have the files. Why don't you have them? Why aren't you making me beg to get you on the show as you're holding them up like this, saying, sorry, I got to go to everybody else first? Why aren't you getting them?
Well, in full transparency, first of all, I want to explain to people what the objective is of the task force, because I think that there was a lot of confusion because of the name of the task force. So we're running the declassification task force, but to be clear, the declassification authority actually solely lies with Tulsi Gabbard, Mike Waltz, Pam Bondi, and the White House legal counsel. And so there's a process that occurs. President Trump signed an executive order specifically covering Martin Luther King, RFK, and JFK. Now, there's supposed to be a plan that's presented to the president that we are supposed to be getting briefed on this week by ODNI at the White House, and that will lay out the process in which declassification will take place. And so just stick with me for a minute. We met with the National Archives today. Once that process takes place, if everything goes as planned, these will be publicly available as soon as we get them. The American people will also be getting them, and they will be on a hard landing page at the National Archives. Now, going into talking about the Epstein files, et cetera, we sent letters to the Department of Justice. We have received that they have confirmation of those letters, but we haven't received dialogue. And my goal and objective is to not, try to attack Pam Bondi or roast Pam Bondi, but we have a investigation that we need to conduct. Obviously, we asked for some transparency on this topic. And so we're hoping that she can come forward. She did say this weekend that she was going to be reviewing those documents. They are on her desk. She reported that on Fox News and on Benny Johnson's show. And so we're simply asking for transparency in the matter. Obviously, same team here, but ultimately I believe that the American people want those files. And frankly, if you have a truly transparent, non-corrupt government, they should have access to them.
100%. The process reeks of deep state red tape. Okay. And by the way, I don't think it is the DOJ. I don't think it's Bondi. I'm not putting this on Bondi's lap. I think it's on the intelligence side. I think it's always been on that side. And do you think it'll be different this time than it was in last time when Pompeo reportedly was like, yeah, we'll get it done, and then came to Trump and was like, can't get it done.
I do think it's going to be different this time, specifically because of who the current Secretary of State is, but then also for the people that are heads of these agencies. I want to put something in perspective, and this is something that I actually just found out, Chris. So there's another office that's actually in charge of when members of Congress come together, for example, members on this bipartisan task force, and push for declassification on things, whether or not it's Epstein, whether or not it's UAP, UFOs. They make the recommendation to the president, and the people on this board actually are encouraging there to be full declassification, no redactions on the JFK files. Now, I've also been told that I need to inquire at the Inspector General at the CIA because they are being told that whistleblowers came forward and actually reported that the CIA initially never handed over documentation to Congress, even dating back to the Warren Commission. And so, to your point, it does reek, and there is a bureaucratic state that controls things, and they shouldn't. And so that's where we come in. We want to put forward legislation to make it easier to FOIA. I'm also being told from the National Archives, of which we are working on this, that when you request information, the National Archives can then declassify it, but has to go through the agency that ultimately owned the material initially. So that's double declassification that doesn't need to happen. And so that's the transparency that we're hoping to bring to the table. I know it's a lot to track, but again, I think that we will get the JFK, RFK, and MLK files. As for the rest of it, we're going to be making recommendations that they declassify, and ultimately we hope that they do the right thing.
Luna, don't be the one whose legacy is that you protected the Epstein files. I'm telling you that right now, Luna. I'll come after you. That's all I'll ever call you every time you're on this show.
Well, I don't have declassification authority.
No, I know. Look, I appreciate you doing this job. It matters. Trust comes with transparency. Everybody says it, but will they do it? Let me ask you just real quick. Doge, this lady Gleason, I never heard of her name before. Do you know her? Is this who's running it, or is this we just hearing this?
I don't personally know her, and I have also not heard that on the Hill. But what I will tell you is I have heard, and I have good sourcing, that Elon Musk is very much so a part of Doge, and that there are some brilliant minds that are behind all of it. I did want to point out, just to put it in perspective, they're finding massive amount of fraud and, frankly, things at the Pentagon that kind of make you wonder. But if I can also just go back to transparency, what Doge is doing is actually saving us money. I frankly wish I had Doge at the FBI, and maybe they'll make their way over there eventually, because we just found out from a whistleblower that the FBI was caught destroying documents, and that's something that we're hoping that Mr. Patel, which I have the utmost faith, will get to the bottom of. But again, that should not be happening in a free and fair society. So going back to Doge, I support what they're doing. I just wish that they weren't. I wish that they weren't needed. I wish Congress would have done its job, which if they would have, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Listen, I appreciate it, but even though I get that Congress has dropped the ball. I still wish Congress was in charge of this because you guys are accountable to the voters and Elon is not. But I agree with you. Well, he's the man behind Doge, even if they didn't represent it that way in federal court the other day. Last word to you.
Well, if I will say, we are going to be trying to codify what Doge is doing. We have a Doge committee on House oversight. And so he is ultimately accountable to the executive branch, and we're going to be codifying a lot of what they're doing. So trust and believe. We're still in charge, but there's a lot to work through here.
As Reagan said, trust but verify. Representative Anna Paulina Luna,
but verify.
You are always welcome here to make the case.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I want to bring in a member of Congress on the Democratic side. What does he think about this bill getting passed? What does he think about what kind of fiscal austerity may be introduced to this? What does he think about who this Gleason person is, who's running Doge or not? What's going on here? Member of Congress Seth Moulton, fair broker, joins us next.
5 years, the MDA community has pushed the science,
shifted the narrative,
and established the field of neuromuscular medicine.
And until that day when this is all a thing of the past,
you couldn't stop us if you tried.
Join us and celebrate 75 years of breakthroughs at MDA75.org.
My name is DeMar Hamlin. I play for the Buffalo Bills, and I play safety. CPR saved my life. I've teamed up with the American Heart Association as a national ambassador to help create a nation of lifesavers, turning bystanders into lifesavers through CPR education and access to AEDs. Nearly 3 out of 4 cardiac arrests that don't happen in hospitals happen in homes. Join me to ensure everyone has the chance to live longer, healthier lives. Visit heart.org/nation.
Me a message saying, drink more water, you look dehydrated. How do I look a little dehydrated? Anyway, member of Congress Seth Moulton, Democrat, Massachusetts. I wanted to bring him in to talk about the budget, immigration, get his take. It's good to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
You voted against the budget?
I voted against a budget that slashes care for 40% of Americans. 40% of Americans depend on Medicaid. 1 out of 3 kids in Massachusetts. Just about everyone who's got parents near the end of life, they depend on Medicaid. And why are we cutting it? To make tax cuts for billionaires, to make tax cuts for the biggest corporations in America. Yeah, it was an easy no vote on that.
So what do you do about the debt and the deficit?
Well, actually, we should probably rein them in. And Trump's plan dramatically expands the deficit because of these tax cuts that are totally unpaid for. And what's going to happen, as you see this playing out, Chris, is they're going to try to make cuts, but they're going to be painful to Republican districts, so they'll walk a lot of them back. They'll still give this massive tax cut to billionaires and the biggest corporations in the world that some of which barely pay taxes to begin with. And the first Trump tax cuts weren't paid for. These won't be paid for as well. And so the deficit will expand dramatically. And essentially what Trump is going to do is bankrupt the country the same way that he has a long record of bankrupting his own companies.
So, as you know, and as I know, and as most people watching don't know, there's very little discretionary spending relative to the overall size of the budget. The idea that you can get the debt or deficit down to near anything like zero without touching entitlements is very hard to understand. Do you accept that premise? And if so, is it just convenience for you to say, hey, I want to protect the people who need it now when it's not on your watch because you're not in control?
No, it's not convenience when the money is going to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. Because that's the way, you how businesses work. You've got revenue and expenses. If you want to spend a lot of money on tax cuts, so billionaires aren't paying taxes anymore, we've got to make up for that somewhere. And they're going to cut services for
I get it. You win the argument,
America, right?
Tax cut for rich people versus screwing poor people. I get it. You win the argument. I'm saying if they weren't going to extend the tax cuts.
It's not even poor people. It's a lot of people in the middle class, Chris. It's a lot of people in the middle class. 4 out of 10 Americans aren't poor.
No.
There are a lot of people in the middle class here who depend on Medicaid.
I'm with you. It depends on which bucket of Medicaid and how much money they make. And I totally get it. And what the match is with the state and the Fed. It's complicated, but I get it. What I'm saying is, If they weren't doing the tax cuts, but they wanted to make the same cuts in spending, would you be in favor of it?
I think there's responsible cuts to be made in spending. Absolutely. Look, I sit on the Armed Services Committee. I have been a constant critic for my entire time in Congress of how the Pentagon spends money. Now, I don't think we should be sending troops to the border. That's how Trump wants to spend Pentagon money. What I think we should be doing is modernizing to meet the threats of the next century. I mean, we'll look at what's going on in Ukraine. You've got $5,000 drones killing $5 million tanks, and we still own a bunch of $5 million tanks. We spend $13.5 billion on aircraft carriers that are basically just big sitting ducks for Chinese missiles. So those are places where we should be modernizing, and you could actually save a lot of money if we did that. That's an example of where I'm perfectly willing to cut government budgets. But that's not what they're doing. You know, DOGE is not making government more efficient. It's making government non-existent. It's completely unaccountable. They can't get out of their own way. They just had to retract their top 4 or 5 big savings because they were fraudulent on their own website. In other words, they were posting fraudulent numbers. And so this is not the way that you make the government more efficient.
But it makes it seem like you're defending the status quo and not wanting to find all of the pork that people hate.
No, Chris. That's not fair, because I just gave you a whole bunch of examples of where I would change the budget. I focused on the Pentagon because, as a Marine vet, that's been my focus on the national security, on the Armed Services Committee. But there are a lot of places where I'm perfectly willing to modernize our government, to make it more efficient, to make a lot of cuts, and save taxpayer money. We should all be in favor of that. But make no mistake, that's not what this unelected billionaire sitting in the White House, who my Republican colleague barely even acknowledged is in charge of DOGE, that's not what he's doing. He's just reigning chaos and trying to make government not exist. He fired a whole bunch of people who were in charge of bird flu, trying to actually bring egg prices down. Then they had to rehire them. He fired a whole bunch of people in charge of nuclear weapons safety, and then had to suddenly rehire them because they didn't even realize what they had done. So this reign of chaos from someone who's unelected, who has no accountability to Congress, that's not the way you make government more efficient.
How much do the Democrats have to own because you didn't find any of this stuff on your watch? So now Trump has the low fruit of pointing out things that make people feel that it's a waste of their money.
Chris, I think we have a lot to own, and I've never been afraid to criticize my own party.
True.
If you're going to be the folks who defend government, then you have to actually do the work to make government more efficient. You know, there's actually a great example of making government more efficient from the 1990s when Clinton and Gore had a massive effort to overhaul the government. They saved billions and billions of dollars, but they did it effectively. They actually empowered federal workers to make those changes, to identify the problems, improve efficiencies on their own, rather than just slashing and burning and sending people out to pasture. So there's a great example in recent history, well, not that long ago, when we did make government more efficient. And guess what? It was led by Democrats. It was done efficiently and effectively, and you didn't have any of the chaos that you see in Washington today.
Congressman Moulton, I appreciate you making the case, as always. You're always welcome here to do so.
Good to see you, Chris.
All right, take care. 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Big treat, real issue that we don't hear enough about. How many homeless people in this country? At least 1 million, at least. And you get veterans, you have mostly women and their kids, people who are addicted, who are being down and out and not treated with any kind of dignity. Award-winning actor Billy Baldwin traveled the country researching the issue for his new movie called No Address. What did he find? Why did he do it? What he wants you to know. Billy Baldwin joins me in studio next. Ooh, handsome.
Fatigue. Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic. Serious allergic reactions, increased infections, or lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, get checked for infections and TB. Tell your doctor about any flu-like symptoms or vaccines.
Thanks to Skyrizi, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement. And that means everything. Now's the time. Ask your doctor about Skyrizi. Learn how AbbVie could help you save.
Homelessness. Everybody says they care. Nothing ever gets done. 800,000 Americans experienced it in the last year. Oh, well, they don't want to work. It's never the case. Highest number ever recorded. Why don't we do so much? Everybody says they care. My sister Maria ran one of the country's largest transitional homeless housing organizations for many, many years. My brother started it. Now, this is one of those situations where I'm supposed to pretend I don't know the guests, but that's crazy because I grew up with him. Award-winning actor Billy Baldwin is a friend of mine. He has been for most of my life. And he has been committed to this issue for a very long time, and not because of his career, but because of his heart and his family's commitment to social justice, okay? New film coming out this Friday. No Address shines a light on the homeless epidemic. So Billy did the work. Again, he's more activist than actor when it comes to this. He went all over the country making this film to educate himself on the realities of homelessness in the country. Here's a taste.
Excuse me, we still need to discuss what we're going to do about the homeless problem. It was on the agenda.
Sir, that will have to go on next month's calendar.
No. You get these people off our streets now. It's out of control.
That's right.
They're hurting our businesses.
It's a total mess, okay? We have a huge homeless encampment right around the corner. Yeah. You got to get the cops in here.
Yes.
Do something.
Yes, we come on.
It's off our streets.
Enough of this. You should be ashamed of yourselves. They're human beings. Where are they meant to go? That's what we should be talking about.
Billy joins us now. I love you. It's great to see you.
I love you too. So great to be with you and to be on your show. It's such an honor.
So this is great when you get to do something that is part of the craft, but also part of your conscience. Mm-hmm. What did you learn about the balance that was just depicted in that scene between homeless as people to help versus homeless as a hindrance, an eyesore?
Well, it's a long answer, but essentially...
The only kind you give, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I tell those stories, you know. Yeah, no, listen, we don't have a homeless problem. We have a mental health crisis in this country. I think we should reframe it like that. It's been compounded and exacerbated by COVID-19 and by the fentanyl crisis. It's a totally new ballgame. We've been having the same argument and the same discussion for decades now. We're going to end homelessness within a decade. We've been saying that for 5 decades now. The takeaways from doing this is that we have a mental health crisis. The numbers are much bigger. There's 1.6 million children homeless. Is it their fault? No. PTSD vets, is it their problem? Is it their fault? No. People aging out of foster care, is it their fault? No. People victims of domestic violence, it's not their fault. Even with the addiction component, even with the drug component, these people don't have access to health care. They can't see an internist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. They can't get medication for anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. So they're medicating on the street with fentanyl and with alcohol. And the drug component is 90% a mental health crisis.
What is it like for you to play a character that doesn't own the values that you have as a person when it comes to the issue?
Well, it's always a lot of fun to have to stretch like that. And of course, I love action, I love drama, I love comedy, I love all of that. But to do a drama that's rooted in social justice or such an important social cause, and to be one of the bad guys and one of the villains, he gets a taste of his own medicine. He's trying to evict these people from a homeless encampment because he wants to develop it for commercial real estate purposes. And everybody needs to know that one of the mantras of this film is that, you know, anybody can become homeless. Mm-hmm. And my character...
People say no. Yeah. I work for a living. I take care of my responsibilities. These are people who have failed themselves.
Listen, Christopher, I had a major health event last June. My son, as you know, had a major health event when he was 16 years old. After insurance, I got hit with a 6-figure bill after insurance. How many Americans that are living check to check, that are trying to pay the rent, they're choosing between food, not a mortgage, food, rent, they're trying to put sneakers on their kids' feet, they get hit with a $75,000 medical bill? You're, one firing or one massive healthcare bill away from... You go from home, you get evicted, you're living in your friend's basement, you're on the couch, then you're in your car living in an alleyway. Anybody can become homeless, anybody.
My father used to say that this issue has America failing the Jesus test, that how you take care of not necessarily the least among you, but the neediest among you, and that this number only keeps growing because we are losing touch with taking care of people.
Well, part of that's most definitely true, and I miss your dad so much, but that is definitely true. But the COVID pandemic compounded this, and fentanyl has turned it into an entirely new ballgame. What's interesting about it is that we have the compassion component now talking to, that sounds awful expensive, how are we going to pay for that? And your audience has to remember that every time there's a 911 call for a homeless event, a health crisis, or a fentanyl event, which there are thousands and thousands every day, sheriff, police, firemen, paramedics, nonprofits, they all respond, costs money. Emergency room costs money. They get admitted to the hospital, costs money. They go into the justice system, judges, courts, lawyers. They get incarcerated, costs money. Department of Commerce, Department of Tourism, Small Business Administration, property values dropping. So we need to have this is going to sound a little scary, but we need 360 wraparound care. We need mental health care. We need addiction treatment. We need job training. We need job placement.
Winds up costing less.
And it winds up, that's what you need to know, is that it winds up it's costing you more now to not do enough.
Look at San Francisco.
And you have everybody's attention now because it's costing everybody.
Now, the problem is that you have, and I want you to tell me how you think the movie will affect this. They have been used most recently, this population, as proof of the problem that is blamed on them. This is the demise of the Democrats. Look at these homeless people. Look at what they're doing all over the streets. Democrats are okay with this. They think this is freedom. These people, you have to force them to get help, even if they don't want it, and we have to have an institutionalization structure.
Well, I think the reason that we have the problem that we have out on the West Coast is for several reasons. The one is the weather. Two is Greyhound diplomacy, where people in Toledo and Akron are given $300 and a Greyhound ticket and said, you want to wake up on the beach in Venice tomorrow, Venice Beach, California. And they also, it's a failure of success, if that makes sense. But we have such good programs to serve the underprivileged in Portland, in Sacramento, in Spokane, Sacramento, LA, all along the West Coast.
Not good enough for them to not be all over the streets.
I know, but people are drawn there because they have services there that they don't have in 45 of the other states.
And yet still,
the services are
not good enough to get them off the street. So even in the best of circumstances, they're still living in the least of circumstances.
Look, when I was I raised my kids, I moved out in 2008 to Santa Barbara, and you would see, plenty of homeless people on State Street. But when I was driving along the 101 during COVID, there were encampments with tents, with mothers and fathers grilling and kids juggling a soccer ball, kids that were in second, third, fourth grade. Not poor kids, not minority kids. These are, lower middle class families that had been thrown on their head because of the pandemic. So
50% of the profits from the film go to organizations to help deal with this issue?
Yeah, 50% of the net proceeds go to nonprofits that are helping the homeless. Some of these programs, Fort Smith, Arkansas, San Antonio, Texas, Austin, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, a great program up in Sacramento called The Gathering Inn. The Gathering Inn has an 83%, I'm talking about mental health, drug addiction, job training, job placement, affordable housing, getting them back on their feet, a life of independence off of the services, total self-sustaining, a success rate of 80%.
Sounds like Maria's program.
Yes. Well, the program that she was doing, I think, with vets here was hugely successful.
Where do they see it? When did they see it?
It opens this Friday. And if you go to,
it's better not screw it up. It's the only thing you had to get right. It's on the screen, James.
NoAddressMovie.com. Buy tickets to NoAddressMovie.com. There you go.
I didn't trust you.
NoAddressMovie.com.
I didn't pass you the ball when we played ball, and this is why I didn't set you up for this. Anyway, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Billy Baldwin,
thanks for having me. Can't wait to come again.
No Address. That's where you see it. It's worth it. We'll be right back. I knew you were going to screw up. The only thing you had to get right.